Hey guys, welcome to the Tennogen Pipeline Guide. This is part 5, which has got to do with textures and tints, and we are going to start in this software called Substance Painter. So if you've done your UV and low poly step, all you need to do is create a new document here, select your file and make your template. We just use the PBR metallic roughness I do. There's loads of different ones depending on what kind of game you're making for, but the PBR is fine for us for making Warframe. So all you need to do is go to select your file. The document resolution is 2048 for other things, but at the time you can change it later. But all you need to do is locate your UV'd low poly helmet. I'm going to be showing the Gara one that I've been working on for the last round of Tennogen, and you can see that I've got my file structure here with all my individual parts. And all I have to do is just find the low poly. And when it's all imported, you'll see that it's all white here. I'm using the exploded version because when I have multiple parts I like to explode by baking. If you have a merged one, you only have to do the merged one. It doesn't matter. I just do it because I like it and I'm used to it. But this white low poly is kind of all we have at the moment. You'll see on the right hand side, this is what it looks like with the actual texture. From the last point, you see that's mirrored because it's completely symmetric. If it's not symmetric, you'll have different parts at different areas of the UV map. My layer is empty. I can remove this layer at the moment if I want, because I'm not going to be using it just yet. And we're going to set off with just kind of start looking at how we're going to get our shader and all that stuff working. So the shader is the little kind of globe with a sphere icon. By default with the template we use PBR Metal Rough, but I will send the link to the Evolution shader, which is the one they use for Warframe. As you can see, I have 5 because they've changed with different versions and they have them in the guide as well for your use. Once you import it, if your thing goes black and silver remains shiny, you know you're doing okay. If it's matte black or pink, you know your shader is broken. You can then move your tint colors 0, 1, 2, 3 and the emissive to change kind of how it looks in your preview. I do red, green, blue and yellow just kind of as they're a bit of an eye catcher and they make things very apparent once we start looking at how we import our ID maps. And how we start baking to get the details on as we go to our texture settings. There are certain ones we start off here and there's ones that are not included for baking that we need. So all we need to do is we need to add user 0, user 1 and emissive. So user 0 has to be set to RGB because we use those colors to dictate how we're going to make our primary, secondary, tertiary accent and emissive colors. User 1 is for your metals. It allows us to kind of see how the accents are colored. And our emissive is basically our energy color. And that can be left as is. So just make sure your user 1 is set to RGB, and that is all you need to get you going for your baking. Helmets require a texture size of 2048 by 1024. Full body textures require 2048 by 2048. So once you click Bake Mesh Maps here, you'll get a new menu. And this is where you have to confirm the output size. It does change sometimes even from your texture settings here. The only one you do not need in this list on the left hand side is thickness because we do not calculate that for Warframe models. So once you go and make sure your output size is back, the locked ratio is by default, but I'm switching here to 2048 by 1024 because I am making a helmet. I have all these different options too. Make sure your anti-aliasing is on for your baking because it gives a better result and they need to use it in game. And this little box here that says high definition messages, that's where we're going to import our high poly. The max frontal distance and max rear distance is basically how far outside the model is the detail going to be captured from and baked onto to make sure we have our thing. Curvature baking is also kind of something that we can switch. I usually use about 0.36. It's basically how soft will items be and how curved will they be. And all we need to do is just select our high poly and then we click our bake. And that's how we just leave it for a while. So right now I'm going to click this little page icon which opens up my folders. I need to locate my high poly. For my one, it's the exploded view. If you have one helmet that's one item, you just get your merged view. It doesn't matter. And you see on the left hand side, they now are going to be calculated in this bake too. So once everything is happy and I'm happy with how it is, if I have merged parts and I have a high poly, I can actually underscore high and underscore low them, and the texture software will match exploded parts or merged parts so they won't actually overlap. So once you click bake, it's going to start baking your normal, your ambient occlusion, all their details, and this can take up to roughly 30 to 40 minutes. Luckily for you, I have actually I have sped this up a little bit. And you can see on the left hand side, as each section is done, they will update, and they will, you'll see the normals, which is the kind of line work, starting to pop in, and the ambient occlusion basically takes the longest part, which is a good time to kind of get coffee or tea, I suppose. And there's no really way to kind of speed it up unless you've got a very, very good computer. But if your computer is like mine and a little bit old, it can take 30-40 minutes. The sub-sampling options do dictate also how long it's going to be. So obviously, if you're just doing rough baking, it's okay. But as you kind of increase the subsampling to 8x8 or 16x16, it will take considerably longer. And I use Substance Painter because it allows me to bake and do all my stuff together with the textures. But you can also use your baking in Marmoset and then import them into here, and then just manually, you can manually just do it at the texture tints. But I like to do this because it does all in one, and it's kind of what DE uses as well. So what you see the normal baked already, and that's kind of where you see all the line work is now appearing on the actual model. The ID is basically all the color tint maps that you did in your ZBrush where you painted out the different colors. You can import those, and we can use them to kind of get a really quick and rough fill. And the ambient occlusion part is actually the part that takes the 30 minutes. So I sped this up, obviously, because it's not interesting. You see on the bottom right hand side quickly that those maps are now populated from the bake. And all the detail is here from my normals. So this was kind of a semi-clean bake, which is kind of nice. Sometimes it doesn't appear, sometimes you have to fiddle around your settings, and sometimes it just means that maybe your exploded view is not completely merged correctly, or that they're misaligned in your viewer. So you just need to import it back to your low poly software and make sure they line up neatly. So to actually get some texture and tint map started, I just need to go to my layers, and I have a start material for you that I put a link in the description that basically you need to put that into your shelf, which is it's also in the guide for Warframe, and this basically allows you to kind of import all the base setup, and just all you need to do really start painting. So I got it off Syncresis, Kaz, she's the 3D modeler, and she has kindly put it in the Discord for Tennogen, and it was for one of our frost helmets. So it's well, I'm going to give you a clean version with none of those masks. That basically all you need to do is kind of add your color selection. But as you can see, using the ones that I have from this, it populated some of the colors that I selected before. But they're wrong, because they're using basically a setup from another helmet that's not this one. So all I'm doing here is just basically clearing those masks so they don't actually affect what it is. And I'm going to show you how we do it from the start. But from the file that you get, do not worry, because this will be completely clean and empty for you. So we have all the things. You see that there's basically each setup for each folder is that we don't touch the tint or the base control. You're basically going to do the little black mask beside the folder icon. That's where you're going to start editing and doing it. If you're getting really comfortable in the future with more helmets, you can actually start editing the tint and base to make sure certain parts are darker. And if you're doing like scratches and overlays, they do affect as well. But for this, for your basic first helmet, for an alt helmet, this is good to go. So this is how I select. Basically, I'm going back to the shader to say, okay, if I know Gara's colors are roughly this, instead of just looking at red, green, blue, yellow, and things, I want to give it kind of a close look to what Gara actually looks like. So when as I sculpt, it gives a better kind of feel, and I can see kind of how it's going to look and what colors might need to be done. Red, green, and blue, and yellow is kind of nice just to import and see how things are going. But for after that, there's no real point. Doing it. So what's happening here? You see that the colors are live reflected, and all I need to do is start going here. So when you see the folder, this like top level folder, the base is kind of the base diffuse color. But if we right click the little black mask that's in this tint mask, and you do add color selection, basically it's going to ask you what you want to do. So you'll see here that the color section is now active, but where's the dialog? So you need to go up to the little kind of paint stroke icon on the top right hand corner, and this gives you the ID map color selection brush. So all you do is go and say pick a color. It then goes to it kind of gives a flat view of your colors, and all you need to do is just kind of click on the color that the first tint will be. So for Gara, it's going to be the base color is orange, so we don't touch that. Then tint 1 is going to be the secondary color, so that's the black, and that's what I just selected. Tint 2 is for the tertiary, and then your tint 3 is your accent color. So it's kind of like a programming rule. Tint 0's number is your base, tint 1, and that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to each of these black little folders. So we're on tint 2 now, which is for your tertiary color. I know it's going to be the white on mine. As you can see, there's some problem there because I did not select the right color. And I just need to go and make sure I'm kind of zooming in and getting the right color, because it does affect your export in the end. And as you can see, it's starting to get a little bit cleaner. My poly paint wasn't exactly clean when I started my ZBrush because I like to kind of clean up in here. And then my tint color for my action 3 is my metal. So because we imported our user 1 and user 0, the shader now interprets the tint 3 as a metal, so the metal effect is applied instantly to this color. If you're doing any emissives, this untiltable black, it's good to actually paint a bit of black that cannot be tinted underneath the emissive to make it pop out. And these are very kind of based on the old Warframe style, that, you know, there were certain parts of the helmet that were just black and you could not change it. That little layer there, you can also paint those in here and they will basically give you the same effect. So I have no emissives, I think, painted in my Warframe, so the emissive at the moment is just blank. A blur effect is also very nice to apply because it gives a bit of like a diffusion of light. Sometimes a very clear dot is okay in certain situations, but a little bit of a glow does give a bit more better feel for the Warframe. So this looks pretty okay, but I want to basically, it's good to paint and separate it, but what I did in my last video is make sure I had a merged version too, and all I need to do goes up to edit, project configuration, I select the new file, which is going to be my merged version with my UVs, because it's good to kind of work together. And you'll see as soon as I import that, things kind of mess up sometimes, which is not a biggie. There's a way to fix this, and I'm going to teach you how. And it's one of the things that I wasn't taught at the start, so I had to learn out the hard way. But it's usually good to kind of see how. So this part for me was a bit of it's a slightly little thing. I think I'm having some problems here, so I'm probably going to speed this a little bit up until I finally got the right file. But we'll see. And there she is. Beautiful. So the black file is now, I see it has the shader and the textures from the previous one, but it's not working. So I just need to go up to settings, reassign texture sets. And I'm going to select the texture from the last thing I just did and apply it to the new one. And just click and drag. And when you click apply, you'll see that it's now carried over to the new model. So don't be alarmed if you're going from your kind of your exploded view to your merge view. There's a way to preserve it all. And here you go. See, it looks pretty clean. This is actually a very clean import of color, so it'll be just mostly tying up and neating up the colors. And you can also just do it from scratch in Substance Painter 2 as well, but it's kind of like if you could do all the work beforehand, speed up later process, what's the point of actually doing extra? So at this point, I'm just going to basically kind of start showing you how we can clean up the lines a little bit. And it's just kind of adding a new layer to these tint masks. So you just right click the tint, and all you need to do is go add paint or add fill. And then this paintbrush is kind of by default, you see it starts painting the color on. If it doesn't work this way, what you need to basically do is go up to your brush settings on your top right hand corner and make sure that it's actually set to all the way to the full right, because sometimes the slider is set to 0 and needs to be fully white to actually start actively painting and removing. So if you don't have that, that's the only way you can fix it there. I used to do the way where I used to add a fill and then paint out and paint over, but that's a lot of extra work when you can just go up to the top right hand corners and make sure that that brush setting is set to fully white, which I can show you now. You have all your settings here, your size, your flow. You can change alpha for what you're doing. The hardness is how hard the edge is. So if you don't want a diffuse, for a lot of these line work, it's better to have a hard one. And that grayscale there, that detects the color. So if your grayscale is not set to 1, it will not paint. If it goes to black, it will remove actively. And anywhere in the middle, we'll start to do like a soft overlay, and we don't like to do those much in Warframe design. So make sure you're set your grayscale all the way to fully white, and you'll be able to paint with clean, nice lines. There is a range of alphas and a range of other things that you can do with experimentation, but at the very start, that's kind of not really a problem. So you see here, I've got a problem with my emissive on the bottom right hand corner. So I need to clear the mask just to make sure, and then I can add a custom painting job to make sure that I can paint the areas I want. So I just make sure that my grayscale is all the way to 1, and I can start painting my emissives. But that emissive is very, very even, and light doesn't tend to be that way. So I can do is basically add a new generator or a new filter. There's different generators and filters depending on what you want. Some generators are more for like adding dirt and that kind of stuff for like the overlay. Your filters give you kind of like, well, it filters basically what you painted. So if you're doing like I have added some files to this already that allow you to make sure that there's dirt and stuff, because every Warframe should not be clean because it's a tool of war. But for your emissive, the filter that we use usually is blur, and you can affect how much it's going to blur and that kind of stuff, and it gives it a bit of just a nicer feel. And I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but I'm trying to really communicate these ideas that you have a swift and easy, as soon as you import your UV and your UV to low poly and you get all your setups done, you can just get going. You know, typically your Substance Painter, like, you could probably do it all maybe in an hour to 4 hours, depending on how much you've done, or how intricate your thing is. The baking is obviously outside that time, but like the painting, if you've got all the work done before, it can be very, very quickly. You're just tidying up lines. I'm just flicking through the little filters here. So you see that when we imported the user one, the folder colors are actually set to red, green, blue, and yellow, which is interpreted by the shader. Your user one, you see everything is blank. The only thing that should be white on your user one folder is your tint 3. If your user one folders are not set to empty and your tint 3 set to white, which is full, that basically means that your metals won't work. And that's basically if you're doing your custom and you don't want your metal to be on the accent, which is usually the convention we have. You can then basically make sure that the user one is applied on the user one material is applied to a different layer and set your metallic and your settings accordingly up to where it is. So that user one is basically just your metallic. And every other layer does have a kind of a trade-off between roughness and metallic, which gives you different effects. These sliders do affect at the tint level. This one kind of has rough settings. You have to kind of make sure that your gray, which is your diffuse level, your base color, is set to the right level too. But if you're doing an alt helmet, you can kind of inspect the other the diffuse maps that they give you for those helmets and kind of try to match it that way. So the gray is kind of roughly around here. It's very, very close to the top, but it's not very bright. So here I'm showing basically these effects, these generators of bumps and dirt that you can toggle on, and they do affect the look of the frame. Once again, your Warframe and your alt helmets and your stuff should not actually be clean because it makes no sense for them to do. Certain ones that the bumping and the dirt doesn't make sense. You can add like effect like rust. I'll also show you later how to apply custom textures. Like if you want to do a certain type of metal to things, you can do that too. But these generators and stuff do give a lot of like story to the thing, which is trying to communicate. But a dirt is the most common one that we use. But you have to make sure, like, look at the body of it. If you're doing a default helmet, like an alt helmet for skin, look at what the default body has. Make sure that it's actually matching. And because if your helmet does not match the same story as kind of the body's given you, in terms of dirt and scratches, then it can be kind of interesting and kind of a bit of a mismatch, which means that it might not get accepted. So you're always trying to kind of make sure that you're matching the body. So here what I'm doing is I'm just going to the untintable black layer. I'm kind of putting that black underneath where I'm going to put the emissive. I'm adding the emissive as black. I'm just to add a paint layer. I add my color, and because this one doesn't have any generators, I'm going to make sure that I have a new filter that will apply a blur. Because then my Warframe will have a nice energy, as you see, more realistic. And obviously, because my model is symmetric, it automatically will apply on the other side. I do notice there's sometimes some issues that if your model is kind of like mirrored from the right-hand side, sometimes the Substance Painter will not let you paint on the left-hand side of the model. You have to paint on the right-hand side of the model you're working with, and it merges over. File and export document export textures allow you to export the textures. The config is what you have to set to the actual export settings of the Warframe, and this is called AWF export. We also have a specular and a roughness one, depending on which kind of workflow you're doing, if your metals are rough or not. I've changed my one that I also export AO and curvature just to make sure. But here you just have to make sure that basically your document size is right. Your PNGs are going to be exported to the document you want. And then once you click export, your textures are done and you're ready to go to the next stage. It is that simple. All you need to do is make sure that your line work of your paints and your things are all clean. The problem is that I didn't save this project yet, so it didn't have a name. If you save this as a name, it will use that name when you're exporting your textures. So I just need to select a folder I want to go to. You can see my messy computer, Tennogen, and this is going to be a Gara helmet. And then I make a folder called textures. Here I'm going to test because I already have textures for this helmet. I select my folder, I click export, and then all these textures are now exported. The document size is right, the PNG is okay, dilation is on. Dilation infinite means that basically it'll stretch the color for low res items, so from far away it doesn't look like it's very messy. And then all these tint maps have been exported. So I've got my roughness, my curvature, my diffuse, emissive, normal, specular, and my color tint map. And that's all you need to when you need to export to your Tennogen viewer. So little things you always kind of want to make sure that I'm going to show you here now. If you really want a stylized look, there's different materials and smart materials you can do. And all you need to do is kind of drag and drop this to the layer you want. Tint 3 is the metal, so obviously if you want a very specialized metal for your Tint 3, you can apply this material to it as well. I would not suggest it. I would suggest trying and fiddle with the roughness and metallicness, and then adding some maybe generators. But if you really want this look for like a special material, you can see here that I dragged this aluminium hexagon grid onto the metal layer, the Tint 3 folder, and it applies to all the metals too. But that color is very ugly. So all you need to do is change the color, turn it off, and then it will inherit the colors that you use from the rest of the file. So some of these materials have inherent colors and stuff. And if you turn off the color material in the things and these different switches, you can see that actually affects the look of the metal too. And they will be exported with the other stuff when they're exported. So the normal and the roughness that the material has does translate over to the map it's going to output. So you can get very, very creative with this. Once again, it might be cool to start off, but very heavily stylized stuff like this doesn't really work, and it tends to be kind of rejected. So I would try and just make your metal the default metal style that we give you in this base setup file. And once you're kind of happy and everything is exported, the only thing that's next to do is basically to upload it to your Tennogen program. I'm showing here that basically the previous one is gone. You can't do it. I hope this is going to be, it makes it a little bit easier up to the point. I can't help you on the painting. You just need to kind of make sure that you're painting and erasing right. But once everything's already done, you're doing okay. I call this Rouen because this is a Gara helmet based on Joan of Arc. Yeah, I think that's all for this section. Hopefully soon now, if my computer and memory serves correctly, because I'm doing this as a live commentary, which is going to be hard, the Tennogen tool. So if you watch the first one, you know where the Tennogen tool is, you know how to download it from Steam. It's kind of default viewer. The first thing you need to do is kind of make sure that you're going to import your file, which is the top bottom left hand corner. And I'm going to show you how you get it basically to get ready to publish. The next video will be about stuff you do once you publish it, and what's the stuff you need to do for Steam Workshop and that kind of stuff, and screenshots and that kind of stuff. But all you need to do is find the same low poly UV model that you had from before. I also like to import the body just so I can make sure that the colors look close, and to make sure that they're in the same socket. But from here, you can also then select an object and move it around to make sure if it's not already imported at the correct height and size. You can also edit it here as well. The tool is a little bit primitive, but it does give you everything you need to do to kind of get going. So you see that I've got my default material for my helmet and my default material for my body. So all you need to do is basically select these transparent grids and locate the textures. So I'm doing the one for the body first because I can show you how it is. This is similar to what we did in the first episode, but it's just kind of a recap because you're almost at the end of submitting your first thing. Once you click the import, you'll see that it applies. And the default values for the diffuse and stuff we don't tend to touch. So that's diffuse for the body. I selected the helmet, and now I'm going to find the diffuse that we just exported from Substance Painter. I'm going to use the ones that I actually have for my own textures because I'm not going to use the ones that we just did. So see, diffuse, the grays look like they match, which is usually a good sign. I'm going to import the normals, which are basically going to be the details. And you'll see as you import each section that the model slowly transforms into kind of the final look. It will not look as good as you have it in Substance Painter, so do not worry. Do not worry at all. So roughness and tint mask. My emissive. If you have any problems, the Tennogen guide, we have a Tennogen forum, Tennogen Discord. And then also in the description below, I will try as much as I can, but I don't know if I'll be able to help you with every single problem. But there's certain things to look out here. So you see my metal is currently black, which usually means that it's bad. That means that it's set to be a metal matte when it's actually specular. I'm going to use the same settings as I did before in my Substance Painter, kind of trying to match it as close as possible. There are actually images online people have put with all the color codes, the hex codes for the viewer. If you're doing a default helmet, try and match it as close as possible. But if you're doing your own custom body and skin, basically you have to make sure that this color you're sending in is going to be the color that you finally submitted for, that will be ready in the workshop. And for when people download it, it'll be the default color. So that's the only part that basically you have to make sure that this color codes match, is for your own custom colors for a full body and helmet. For default, just make it match as close as possible. Down here, the emissive is a different section I'll be showing you in the next video. Emissives, at the moment, you see that they're just kind of dots. You can add a certain layer to that PNG, which is your alpha layer, and you can set this if you want it to pan or move, which gives you glowing effects or different, like, if you have like very nice emissives on a Sindana, how that will look, even though it might just be an emissive block of just pure paint. That alpha is then how it looks, so it can be a design of wings or something, but it's all done in that layer, and I'll show you how to do that in the next episode. But for when you're usually beginning, you don't really need that unless you're doing custom Sindanas. So once everything is kind of imported, I'm just making sure that the normal matches on the body as well, because I like to kind of make sure that everything looks good together, because if you just do one section and not the other, sometimes things creep up that you might have missed the diffuse level, the metal might not match, there's lots of different things like that. And I'm just selecting the tint mask and copying the colors from above down below, because why would you do it all again? And make sure you click enter or click another text field, otherwise the color does not apply. And it will, as soon as you, if you just leave like that way, it will revert to the default color as well. So make sure you also click enter or click another text field. Little things like this, they're little tips, but they're just like little pain points. I'm trying to go through my notes and make sure that I can give you as much of the things that I learned the hard way, or just that, kind of bothersome, so you know beforehand. And this Gara, you see, she's looking pretty good. Now the glass parts are obviously done separately. For Gara, they're a separate mesh. So you bake them separately, you do them separately, but in here you just import the glass parts onto it as well. So instead of applying for 2, you apply for 4. And the importer is kind of a bit of a tricky one for this one when you kind of bundle it up, but you have to actually make sure that you fix that before you export. So once I'm all happy, you see that we have an upload tab. I can start saying that I want to do my my new title, my description. If you're doing an update, you can do the change notes. Your public visibility has to be public if you're going to put on the Steam workshop so people can vote. Change notes, if I change something. A cover image, we also have any previous workshop items. So if you've got items to date, you can then click one of those and say that it's an update of that. And then it's also select what tag it is, so people know when they're searching for it, which Warframe it is going to be. Now this content path is very important. You see that it requires a Tennogen export zip generated by the viewer tab, and to get that zip file of all these textures together, you have to click the button beside import, which is save. A new dialog pops up, which basically says, is it a Warframe operator or other? You say the body, and you have to select the body name. Because I'm stupid, I didn't name them differently, and it's just kind of roughly by I. And basically you kind of select the name of the material it's going to be. When you click export, this can take about 2-3 minutes or 10 if you're an old computer like mine. And basically it generates a zip file in the folder of your choosing, and that zip file has all these settings and all this stuff put together, and that zip file has to go into the folder with the low poly OBJ files. of your body or your helmet. And also make sure that I also bundle in the AO and curvature just to make sure, because then when you upload, it uploads everything together. So all it needs is basically just this zip file, the low poly UV'd OBJ that you used for baking, and that's it. So I usually make a folder called upload, where I put this export in, and you see I've got my glass, I've got my helmet, the MTL files are already generated from exporting in the previous softwares. I also put my AO and my curvature, but they're custom from my export, which you can add in your export settings in the configuration tab as well. It's not needed, but I just do it just in case you want to use it. But apparently, from what I've been told, they say that Substance Painter's AO or curvature files are not great, so it's not necessarily used. It's just kind of everything I can give, I do. And once I'm happy, I just go to my upload tab. I go to the content path, make sure that I click the 3 dots to locate this new file. It just gives you a warning to basically make sure that you've got all your FBX and OBJs in the same folder as the item. Just select the top level folder where everything is. And all you need to do after you make sure you have a cover image and all your text filled out is you just click the upload button. And that is how you submit your first item to the Tennogen store. If you followed everything to date, this is kind of I hope that is much clearer, because it's not a lot of stuff that's told. The guide does show things. Yeah, I'm just trying to... I wish I could actually write this, because, you know, it would not help. Make sure it's set to public and upload. And then you have your first Tennogen item in-game. Well, it won't be in-game, it'll be in the workshop. The next video will show you how to make sure you can get nice renders for your video, how to put things like into the Sketchfab viewer for your 3D results. Cover photos. Your cover photos have to be square image, by the way, but your other images can be any resolution you want. They just need to be underneath 2 megabytes for the Steam Workshop. And I'll go through that in the next video, how to make a custom emissive too. And those things might be handy. And that would all you really need to do. If you haven't, make sure that if you go to the Steam Workshop, you have to make sure that you've done your tax declaration, that stuff. They give you forms and stuff to sign, because you do need to get that before you actually actively submit. So in summary, all you need to do is you need to import your OBJ, whether it's merged or exploded. You can change an exploded file to a merged one and continue on that. You need to start applying your tints, which is basically making sure that you're going to set your shader, set your layers, you bake the textures, and then you use your ID maps on the black masks for the tint folders to select the colors you're going to use, and make sure all your line work is nice and clean. And then all you need to do is basically export those textures, import it into the Tennogen viewer, and make sure you have your diffuse, your normal, your roughness, your specular or metal file, and your emissive tints all applied. Your default colors are also selected too, and make sure that you have your tag, your description, your name, cover image, and exported textures from the Tennogen viewer in the Tennogen export.zip file in the same folder as your FBX and your OBJ, and you are ready to submit and do everything, and you're almost there. So I hope this guide is very handy. I hope that you don't mind my running commentary, because it's the only way I can actually comment as I'm watching. I hope this has been very, very handy, and until the next episode, I can't wait to help you get the final step. And any questions or below, do contact me. There's also a Tennogen Discord, but all the relevant files and stuff you need to get set up will be in the description below for your perusal and usage. So until then, have a great week or 2 or 3, depending on when I'm free, and I will see you very soon, and thank you so much for watching.